Carolina gives up inexplicable scores at the end of both halves, and consequently, the losing streak has grown to 4.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Saturday, October 12th, 2024. Welcome into this live postcast edition of the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for coming in with us right after the game has ended. Hopefully, a lot of you are walking down the hill to the basketball scrimmage, which will go, Carolina's bound to win that one. So there we go. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord and our great Locked On Tar Heels insiders. This live postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Oh my, you guys. Okay, Carolina loses to Georgia Tech 41-34. The losing streak extends to 4 games. The losing streak to Georgia Tech extends to 4 games, and 6 of the last 7 the Yellow Jackets have won over the Tar Heels. This is a game that Carolina looked primed to lose, came back to snatch overtime from the jaws of defeat, only to allow it to go right back as Georgia Tech scores at the end of the game, essentially, to an insane sequence, if we're being honest. So I'm still kind of reeling from it. We're about 15 minutes after that ended, and that's where it is. So let's start with the end of these two halves. First half, it kind of essentially, if we're being honest, plays out like a lot of things have lately, where Carolina's kind of neck and neck with a team that's pretty similar to them, and then it just starts getting away. Well, right on Carolina's last drive before halftime, touchdown to J.J. Jones wearing Tylee Craft's jersey. I mean, it's a beautiful moment, and the Tar Heels are within 3 points, heading to the locker room, seemingly, and going to be able to come out and get the ball after halftime. They've been winning the toss a lot and deferring and not been able to make bank with it. Oh, by the way. And so they're like, all right, you feel pretty good being down 3 compared to how things were going. But then Georgia Tech, who has 34 seconds and 2 timeouts, just allows this massive run, multiple missed tackles, and how far? It was a 37-yard run all the way down, and Georgia Tech is able to get a field goal out of it and go to the locker room up 6 instead of 3. Now, think ahead to Carolina getting that field goal seemingly at the very end of regulation. That's a game-winning field goal instead of a game-tying field goal had they not pooped their pants on that play. But then we go to the very end of the game where, unfortunately for Georgia Tech, Haynes King, their quarterback, had gotten hurt. Earlier in the game, had been toughing it out. Good for him. Unlike some of his Yellow Jacket teammates, oh, by the way, who very conveniently got injured a lot in Carolina's last 2 drives. We'll just leave that there. Carolina is able to go down and get in position to, John Copenhaver's got to catch that ball, by the way. That's a go-ahead touchdown with under a minute left to go. Anyway, Burnett completes field goal, tie game, feeling good about overtime because Georgia Tech has not been able to do anything for the last half of the fourth quarter because of the quarterback change. So Georgia Tech is going to get the ball left, again, under a minute, same as the first half, 44 seconds. They've got 2 timeouts. The ball's at their own 25. First play from scrimmage there gets a couple yards, and then a 68-yard touchdown run from Jamal Haynes to basically ice the game. Carolina has a couple seconds, get the ball, and Connor Harrell's in for that last sequence. That was weird, and it's just, you've got to be able to close these halves, not allowing points. It was absolutely absurd to see that happen. So there was all of that. And let's allow that then to take us into talking about Georgia Tech's running game, which finishes this, by the way, let me, as we're talking here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the box score for those of you watching in real time so that you can see it if you're listening back to this later. So glad you're here. You can pull up the box score elsewhere. You can see it, though, if you're watching this, that Georgia Tech rushes for 371 yards. 3 different players had 60 or more rushing yards. Haynes King, the quarterback, just 11 rushes for 107 yards. And he's not even playing the end of the game. He probably would get up to 130 or so. Jamal Haynes, 170 yards. And he would have been over 100. Don't just think, oh, we got that big chunk at the end. He wouldn't have been. No, he had 102 yards even before that. So even without that game-ending run, Georgia Tech has 2 rushers over 100 yards, and then Chad Alexander had 61. Those 3 guys combined also had 5 rushing touchdowns. And like for this North Carolina defense, to know that Haynes King clearly is messed up and cannot throw the ball, and I know he made a couple good throws still, to know that Georgia Tech can should not be able to do anything through the air, and yet you still cannot stop this rushing attack, is bewildering to me. Got to be able to hold up against that. And the fact that Carolina wasn't is just a sign that things are not where they need to be. Now, on the other side, let's say something positive about North Carolina here before we get to eventually to the break. The key matchup coming into this thing was Omarion Hampton against Georgia Tech's rush defense, which had not allowed a 100-yard rusher all season long. In their 6 games, Florida State's leading rusher had 38 yards, Georgia State 61. Syracuse against Syracuse, Georgia Tech allowed their most rushing yards to a single running back this season, 83. But their last 3 games, the lead rusher for VMI had 16 yards, Louisville 23, and last week Duke 48. So they had not allowed a rusher, any single running back, to get over 50 the last 3 weeks. Omarion Hampton got over 100 in the first half, and I know a lot of it was that big chunk run where he got 71. Was that how much it was, I believe? But also there was that 40-plus yard run that got called back for just a silly penalty in the second level. And so Omarion had a big day, wound up with 18 rushes for 137 yards, and again, could have been much more. But great job there. That's both the line and Omarion doing what they need to do. But clearly there were a lot of issues elsewhere. And here's what I'm realizing more and more and more about this North Carolina team. It's going to be a very obvious thing, but you're going to understand why I'm saying it. These are the types of games that in the past 2 years, you just say, good news, everybody. Number 10's back there and he's going to bail us out. And number 10, Drake May, is not back there to bail out North Carolina. And they just simply do not have that player to mask all the sins, to mask all the deficiencies that this North Carolina team unfortunately has. And, it's just different with an Omarion Hampton. Yes, he's your best player, but he just can't go out and sling the ball all over the field like Drake could. And so it's just a different type of what that means for your best player. And so I'm just realizing that more and more and more, how big a deal it is that you don't have a Sam Howell or a Drake May to bail you out of games like this, where throws here and there that would have been made and caught. That was another issue, and we'll get to that. But just all of these kind of things. And Criswell had a decent day, but we'll get to some other stuff with that here in just a little bit. But the lack of Drake May or Sam Howell to help you, with all due respect to Jacoby Criswell, is very, very bad for this team. Got to be able to come through in those moments. All right, we've got a lot more to get to. I want to continue to look at, we've been looking at, can Carolina have the play, man, that gets them? They got it yet again like last week, but it still wasn't enough. Can Carolina do the little things to put themselves in position to win? They had a couple, but they had more that were bad. So I want to get to all of that conversation and more coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about our friends at FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. How about some ACC regular season basketball odds, as now we're turning our attention to the blue-white scrimmage going on. Not quite as we speak. It's not tipped off yet. Duke leads the way in those odds at plus 135, followed by Carolina at plus 370. And everybody else is way, way, way back. Third best odds, Wake at plus 1,000, Miami 1,400, and Virginia 1,500. So if you want to get in on any of that action or other games going on this weekend, or maybe NFL stuff tomorrow as Drake May makes his first start for the Patriots, you can go check all of that out at FanDuel.com. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, here's where I want to head next. We've been talking about, because of the similarity, this is going to sound like a broken record, but because of the similarity of all the ACC teams, save maybe Miami, maybe Clemson, everyone at least on Carolina's schedule, you can win or lose, and it's a razor's edge that's going to get you there, meaning you've got to be the team that makes the majority of those little plays, the heady plays, the things that just the foundational plays that you need to make to win. And Carolina had a couple of those in this game, but they did not have enough of them. And in fact, the negative things that happened were bigger. So let me walk through some of that. Ready? The good things. On the yes side of it, of just making a play, I feel like Carolina's receivers have not been able to just like win 50-50 balls. There's not like a dude, you think about just playing Georgia Tech and somebody like Megatron or Devontae Walker last year, Josh Downs before that. Rare has it been that a Carolina receiver has been able to go make a play lately. And Kobe Paysour had the catch on the first drive of this game that I was like, that is the catch that you need. More of that, right? From Kobe or Copenhaver or Nesbitt or, whomever it's going to be, Nate McCollum. That is a wide receiver making a winning play. We'll talk more about it in a second, but like the Huzzy punt return, that is the kind of thing that changes games like this. But on the negative side of it, Carolina had a fumble lost on the first drive of the game. J.J. Jones, the face mask penalty on what would have otherwise been a 40-some yard rush for Omarion Hampton. A lot of times you say, well, of course, that's why he got a 40-yard rush. No, it was an unnecessary face mask that Omarion was going to be by that dude. Jacoby Criswell had an opportunity. When was it? He had a check down that he could have gone with, held on to the ball too long, and it wound up being a sack. Those kind of things. When Omarion did have his big run for 70 whatever yards it was, 71 yards, literally the next play, Carolina loses all that momentum because they had 12 men in the huddle. Wound up still scoring off of this, but it could have screwed you up. The field goal allowed right before halftime. And I just can't wait. And we already talked about that. But the first drive of the second half for Carolina, the weird play call, Carolina's moving. Again, you get the ball back after halftime, and you're like, all right, I know we just let that field goal before halftime, but now's the time we score a touchdown, and we got the lead in this game. They were making had forward progress going, had some momentum. That's the word I'm looking for. And then you get to second, whatever it was, wide receiver pass, and you throw it to Ship, which is fine. He's a great playmaker, but he's a freshman. He doesn't know what to do in those moments. So instead of throwing it away, there's this massive loss, and now you're looking at 3rd and 22 to start the first half. Carolina gets a big chunk on 3rd down on the screen pass, but then they go for it on 4th down, and of course it's incomplete because Carolina, until Criswell picked up a 4th and 6th, was like, of their last 5, I think, on 4th downs, because they had the 4 at the end of last game to finish 2 of 6 on 4th down, and then this one. And so it's just like, that just ended up being a cluster of a mess. You had the Nate McCollum fumble in the 4th quarter. Then you had the Nate McCollum miss. I mean, wide open, ball right in his hands. That would have been 1st down. And that's coming off of all the good stuff he did last week. Carolina, Georgia Tech's last drive. And you're hoping man. We got like Haynes King is out. All we got to do is play the run, stop the run. They're not going to be able to throw the ball. And what happens literally before Georgia Tech can even snap the ball, a delay of game on the defense. So it's 1st and 5. And now you're in an impossible situation. Thankfully on 3rd and 1, Georgia Tech had their own penalty and Carolina was able to stop them, get the ball back and go tie the game. And then another of these small things, John Copenhaver not catching. I know it was a tough play, but man, the ball was right there. It was a great ball by Criswell, and Copenhaver's got to catch that. And we didn't know at the time that Georgia Tech was going to turn around and get that touchdown run to win the game. But at that point, that Copenhaver not catching that ball means you got to go to overtime instead of winning the game. I'm sure I could name more, but that's just the list I was keeping in real time of all these things that if even Carolina had fixed 3 of those 9 or 10 that I just listed off, they win this game, right? It's just the little things that this team is not being disciplined enough to put together. For example, another thing, I'm tracking penalties because there had been all the penalty issues several weeks ago. And you know what's cool? Carolina only had 3 penalties in this game. Great job. I love to see that. And in fact, none in the first quarter and none for the first half of the second quarter. But here's what those 3 penalties were. The J.J. Jones face mask that brought back Omarion's 40-whatever yard run. And what happened on that after that? I'm trying to look back to see if Carolina did anything after that. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, that is a very negative thing. The second of the penalties was the 12 men in the huddle 5-yard penalty right after Omarion's big run. Thankfully, Carolina ended up scoring on that, but it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot in a major way when you do that. And then the third penalty was the delay of game on Carolina defensively starting Georgia Tech's last drive. All of these are things that you simply cannot do. And then there's the question of, can Carolina get a game-changing play? Yes. For the second week in a row, yes. And that's so encouraging. The pick 6 last week for Caleb Cost, the Huzzy punt return in this game. And those should be the things that if everything's equal and you get that, that should be the thing that puts you over the top. But Carolina wasn't able to capitalize on either of them and ultimately lost both games. Another thing we're looking at is, can the defense stop chunk plays? It's been through the air the last several weeks. And in this one, let's go to Georgia Tech's chunk plays. They had 13 chunk plays. How many of them were like, because big plays, it counts on the stat thing as 15 plus yards through the air, 10 plus yards on the ground. Of those 13, 3 were air, 10 were ground. It feels like Georgia Tech, Paul Johnson era. One of the passing 3 big plays was more than 20 yards on the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4 of the ground were over 20 yards. And so you had 5 chunk plays, still too many. I think last week it was 8, if I remember correctly. So that's what you're looking for. And then, you know, we had, like, you're thinking about Nate McCullum, and man, getting to go back up against his former team last week, had a massive game, and you're like, oh man, that's going to come together, and Nate's going to have a big game. It's going to be great. And I love to see that come together. Well, unfortunately for Nate, 1 catch for 13 yards, had 3 targets, but then on that catch was where he had the fumble and then the drop coming right after that. And so it's just, Carolina just cannot get out of their own way. One piece of good news is Kaimon Rucker started this game. Great to see him back playing more than he had. Finished with 4 total tackles, 3 of which were solo. Good stuff there. But you look at the defensive numbers, 0 sacks in this game for Carolina. 0 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, no interceptions, 2 breakups, 7 quarterback hurries. Power Echols leads the way with 12 tackles. So good to see Kaimon back in there. You might remember one of the what to watch for things that I was watching for was Jacoby Criswell completing more passes. Literally every week that he has started, his completion percentage has gone down. Let me pull up what he's done and remind you of where it was at coming in. Just one game at 60%, and then it's gone downhill from there. but even that one was 60.1%. Okay, here is the completion percent, 60.9%. That was against Central, 58.3 against James Madison, 53.8 against Duke, 53.3 against Pitt. And then today, I got better, but it was still under 60%. Jacoby Criswell finishes 17 of 31. That's 55%. It's just not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough to overcome. And as another reminder, what I said earlier about, oh yeah, there's no Drake May back there. And that's what we're wrestling with. That's what we're reckoning with. And so Carolina's just going to have to, again, because there's not Superman to put you over the top, you got to win the little things. You got to win these little things. And Carolina just simply is not. So that's where we're at, and that's where we're going to go. Okay, I want to go look at, I know we've got some questions coming in, and so we'll check that out. Actually, as I look at it, most of it is just comments, excuse me, about Tylee Craft and saying hi and some Fire Mack now and all of that. And so, man, just it's tough because I think with the Tylee Craft of it all, you were very hopeful that Carolina would be able to put this together, win for Tylee. You know, I know Mack Brown and I know a lot of the guys were very emotional. And I know it's been very negative today because now you are 3-4 on the season. And while, again, every game you look at is a possible win, it's also a possible loss. And Carolina has not been able to get on the positive side of it. And so, man, it's just so very difficult to process and to deal with. And is this really what's going on? I think we knew that this season would not be what it was. And, but this is where we're at now. And Carolina's 3-4. Yes. I'm seeing in real time here, a lot of people in the comments are saying rest in peace, Tylee. And unfortunately, we are hearing Carolina football announced 20 minutes ago as we record this at 3:03 p.m. I don't know if that was the actual time, but that's when Carolina football posted it. It is with love and fond memories that we announced Tylee Craft has begun his journey on the other side. Tylee meant so much to so many and affected us in ways we'll always be thankful for. He was one of one, and while he won't be with us in body, he'll be watching over us with endearing smile and endless positivity. On behalf of his family and our program, we sincerely thank everyone who supported Tylee during his battle with cancer. It means more than you could know. Amy Purrier is in the comments and saying that Tylee passed away this morning. And so what a reminder, you guys, that as we are in a moment of like, man, tough one for Carolina, not able to win a football game on the field, but a sobering reminder of the reality that this is sports. And as Dean Smith was so often fond of reminding his team, that there are people in Asia who have no clue and no idea that there was a basketball game just played in Chapel Hill. And this is one of those moments where while we are frustrated and disappointed about losing a football game, that pales in comparison to the frustration and the disappointment and the anger we all feel with losing another life to cancer. And so to Tylee and to his family, man, we're with you and we're thinking of you and praying alongside you. And there's just no good way to respond to that. I mean, it just sucks, you guys. And a young man should not have to process that. And for his strength and endurance, thank God for that. But thank God that his pain and his suffering are now behind him, and that he fought so well. And may we all be reminded in moments like these to cherish every moment we have, every breath we take, and to live life well. As Carlton Van Hoy is saying in the comments, a reminder that Tylee does have a GoFundMe. And so if you'd like to support that and be part of it, you can certainly do so. Folks, I don't want to give you all the normal ending spiel. I just want to get us out of here and just say that even in the midst of this, it's a great day to be a Tar Heel because of this family and who they are and what they mean. I hope and pray that you all have a good weekend. We'll be back together on Monday, a show that's already recorded with Tyler Hansborough, so make sure you tune in for that, and then we'll be back together to get you ready for the Memphis scrimmage on Tuesday. Until then, though, peace out.